So this is what they taught us during our childhood days. We were taught we will fall down, they will fall down, everybody will fall down, and supposedly to be the most elegant places like Parliament and all. No, these sort of things happen. This is another Parliament. This is Korean Parliament. We can see people fighting, hitting, thrashing everybody. No, Ukraine Parliament, blood all over. See Indian Parliament also. The same thing happens. No, so we gonna see about traumatic injuries. So, like I said in the initial slide, so I'll be sticking mostly onto the uh, primary dentition. Okay. So my today's presentation mostly you would have heard about. You would have had a. I heard your portions got over. So I thought, let me just deviate from your regular portions and give you an introduction or give you some insights about traumatic injuries and other thing apart from the routine stuff. So this presentation mostly will contain introduction, etiology, epidemiology, classification, history, and some part of diagnosis and management. So, being a pediatric dentist and periodontist, we'll be seeing, most of the injuries occur by the age of 1 to 3 years. So, that's when a periodontist and a dentist, eventually a dentist, will come into play, because that is when the child will learn to walk, they will learn to run, climb, play. Okay, they do every sort of, they try and experiment everything at home. No, by 2 years of by at the age of 1 year, they start to learn to walk and all. By 2 years, they become very mischievous, terrible twos. That's why they call it as terrible twos. They'll be running here and there. Okay, so being a dentist, we'll be coming across some sort of damage to the tooth and its supporting structures. So we need. So why do we need to know about all these things? So there's a picture in this slide. Okay, so primary dentition, the roots of the primary tooth is more closely associated with the developing tooth germ, right? So any damage to the developing tooth germ will have some long-term effects on it, right? Because primary tooth will be there maximum till the age of 12, 13, maximum up to 14. Starting from 8 months of 8 months after after birth till 13 or 14, it's going to be the longest duration that the primary tooth can survive. But whereas the permanent tooth starting from the age of 6 till the end of life, it has to be there. So if any damage that happens to the permanent tooth germ will have a long-lasting effect till the person dies. Okay, so that is why permanent tooth management is very important as far as trauma is concerned. And moreover, at this particular age, like less than 5 or 6, 7, and all, the bone is going to be very thin. Okay, so it's going to be very flexible. I won't say it's very flexible. It is more cancellous in nature. Whereas as the individual grows older, the bone becomes stronger, more cortical in nature. Even maxilla is cancellous, but still it becomes thicker as the individual grows in age. Okay, and also you would have learned in your teeth setting, when we do our teeth setting in the second year, we keep the upper incisors at an inclination, at an angulation, whereas the permanent primary tooth it will be in a vertical position. So any damage, if any intrusion or any sort of things that happens, it will have direct impact on the tooth germ. Okay, can pull the chat and sorry. So, and moreover, any damage, aesthetics is also of major concern at this particular age. So, what are the etiologies pertaining to trauma of primary dentition? You have this lot of etiology that I've listed in the slide, and predominantly for primary dentition, these are the major things that we will come across, like iatrogenic injuries to the newborns, falls in infancy, child's abuse, and other reasons. And there can be falls and collisions. Sometimes there will be some sort of bicycle injuries as well. So, what are the predisposing factors that will predispose trauma to the primary dentition? Some of the thing that I've seen listed here is protrusion of the upper incisors. By the age of 7, 8, there will be exchange of incisors taking place. Okay, that at that particular age, the face or the bone of that particular individual will be small. The maxilla wouldn't have grown to the fullest. So eventually what happens is there will be, the tooth will be comparatively bigger, the adjacent tooth, so it will be very protruded at that particular age, like 7 or 8 or max 9 or 10. Till that particular age, there are chances for the tooth to be more protruded because the maxilla wouldn't have grown to its fullest size. And the other predisposing factor for trauma to the upper incisor is going to be insufficient lip closure. So this is another predisposing factor for trauma to upper incisors or the uh, frontal region. So moving on to the next aspect is the mechanism of dental injuries. So two things that we can see here. One is direct trauma and there is indirect trauma. I put some barcodes here. You must be wondering what are those barcodes. Can anybody tell me what is there in that barcode? There you go. Can somebody unmute and tell me what is there in the barcode? If you can't find out, just shake your head vigorously right and left looking at the barcode and tell me. Is there somebody is there online? Everybody's gone. Nirmala Shanmugam, you answered first, so I'm asking you again. Can you tell me what is there? Anybody else?
Sir, Rajnikant, sir.
Very good. So this is just a thing to show you. There's two things can happen during a traumatic injury. Very good. Whoever answered that. Direct trauma is when there's an injury and the damage taking place at that particular point is going to be direct trauma. And indirect trauma is the individual would have had some injury to the lower chin. Okay, that can be one of the possible effects can be seen as trauma to the lower chin or the mental region. Okay, the fracture can happen to that particular bone. That's direct trauma. And when there is a trauma on the chin, usually you need to examine the upper premolars as well as you need to examine the condyle. Okay, you can have a condylar fracture or you can have a vertical fracture in a maxillary premolars. Okay, so this is called direct and indirect trauma. The term means that. Okay, so what are the factors that characterize or impact to the what are the impact that will happen during trauma? So basically, we need to know about the energy of the impacting object and the nature of the impacting object, whether it is hard or resilient, and the shape of the impacting object, and the angle or the direction of the impacting object. So when I say about energy of the impact, mainly two factors are involved in it. One is the mass, the other one is velocity. Okay, so usually for this example, what they say is direct injury from a gun bullet shot. Okay, so gunshot injury, you have a low mass and a high velocity object hitting that particular region will cause an injury to that particular region. Okay, so for example, I can give you an example. You sitting in a live class and sleeping in the classroom or disturbing the class, one of the staff will take a duster and they will throw it on your face. Unfortunately, if it falls on that particular front teeth, there can be trauma to that teeth. Okay, and if it is a sponge is being thrown. Okay, there won't be much of velocity, much of the mass is not there, so the impact is going to be very less. And when I talk about the resilience of the impacting object, that's what it means. If there's a spongy nature of that impacting object, the force will be distributed in that resilient region, so that the trauma to that particular incisor or in that region may not be seen prominently. Okay, so the forces will be distributed to that other regions like the periodontal ligaments and the bones. And moving on to the shape of the impacting object, it can be either a sharp object or a blunt instrument. So if a blunt instrument is impacting an individual on the front region on the lip or any of the orofacial region, there's going to be more of trauma happening to the pedals and the bone. Whereas if it is a sharp object like a pen, if a person is sitting hitting the pen constantly and something happens, will be you can see a fracture of the incisor or the tooth taking place. Okay, so that is the shape of the impacting object. The other one is the angle of direction of the impacting object. Like I was telling in the direct and indirect injury, when there's a trauma to the chin, you can expect some condylar fracture or a vertical fracture in the premolars. And so you can expect a fracture on a horizontal plane or some sort of a oblique fracture taking place in the tooth. So it all depends upon the angle of direction of the impacting object. So moving on to epidemiology, the prevalence of traumatic injuries from the in the age group of 0 to 6 year segment varies from 11 to 30%. So that's what we saw in the introduction. When the child learns to walk, okay, usually that starts from the age of 1 year, 1 year, and and henceforth it goes. So the risk of trauma increases twice as high as the average incidence for all children. So and predominantly this sort of injury will be seen at the home, where most of the children are very active before. This is preschooling age. So home is the place where most of the trauma happens. So before moving on to the classification, so I want one of you to tell me what classification you know to classify traumatic injuries.
Ellis and Davis classification, sir.
Very good, Sri Lakshmi. So can you list out? No, it can be wrong also. Anybody can open up and tell. So this is not a, I'm not going to give you any internal marks and anything. So I just wanted to be interactive so that I know what, I mean, I can understand what you know about Ellis and Davis classification. Can somebody tell me what is class 1?
That involves only enamel, sir.
Class 2?
With the dentin, sir. And class 3 that involves along with the enamel.
Okay. Class 4?
Sir, it is associated with non-vital tooth, sir.
Exactly. Class 5?
Avulsion, sir.
Class 6?
Fracture of the root, sir.
Oh, right. Class 7?
Fracture of the tooth, sir, with either of the crown or the root fracture, sir.
Actually, it's displacement of the tooth.
Displacement, sir. Displacement of the tooth.
Displacement. Class 8 is crown and mass, and class 9 is traumatic. Okay, I'm going to give you an example now. Okay, I want one of you to give me an answer based upon the classification. A child aged 5 years. Okay, there is a fracture involving enamel and dentine. Okay, the child is a boy. Okay, his age is 5 years. There's a fracture line involving enamel and dentine. What type of classification does this fall under? In which category this will fall under? Just somebody, yeah, tell me, Sri Lakshmi.
Class 2, sir.
Class 2. Okay, what is class 9 in Ellis and Davy?
Class 9, sir.
What is class 9?
Traumatic injuries involving primary dentation, sir.
Very good, Janani. So actually, if you see, according to Ellis and Davies classification, this classification was formulated in the year 1960. Okay, so predominantly they were handling only trauma to permanent dentition. So they classified everything according to the permanent dentition. So whatever, even if it is enamel fracture or dentine fracture, if there is an avulsion of primary tooth, okay, if there is a luxation injury or there is a displacement of the primary tooth, you are going to term it under which category? Class 9. So there is no proper, there's no distinct or there is no clarity when you talk about primary dentition. Okay, we need to have a classification or a criteria that will help us to give a proper classification. So even for when you talk about displacement in class 7, there is no proper clarity on whether it is an intrusion or is a lateral luxation or is an extrusion. Okay, all those things, there is no clarity in Ellis and Davies classification. I'm not saying this classification is very bad, but there is some ambiguity present in that classification. There are so many other classifications that has come up where various authors have put forward many classification, but one classification is very predominantly used. Even in WHO website, they've used it, which is called as the Anderson's classifications. Okay, So Anderson, this modified, and you should be aware there's something called as descriptive and a numerical classification. This classification is both descriptive as well as numerical, because there's some sort of numbers given in this. Because whenever we discuss, see, for when you communicate between professionals, okay, you're going to say class 1 fracture. I'm invariably I'm going to understand that is going to be a fracture line is involving only the enamel but not the dentine and the pulp. So that is what it means, okay, according to Ellis and Davies. So similarly, this classification, modified Anderson and Anderson classification, okay, it has got a descriptive version as well as numbers are given according to WHO. Okay, WHO, you should be you all know, World Health Organization. For every diseases, there's a number given according to WHO. Okay, so this classification has been accepted and widely used. You can use this classification for both primary as well as permanent tooth. Okay, in the Ellis and Davies classification, can somebody tell me when an individual is coming with some sort of trauma? Okay, patient has fallen down. Will there be any will there be a tooth trauma that will take place, or some sort of soft tissue injuries can also take place, right? Can you classify it using an Ellis and Davies? No, I don't think it is possible because there's no description on the soft tissue injuries. Whereas the classification, what I'm going to deal is, will give you a comprehensive classification. It will discuss about injuries to the dental hard tissues and the pulp, injuries to the PDLs, okay, injuries to the soft tissues, injuries to the bone. So it will give you a comprehensive classification. So you can write a multiple diagnosis. I mean, multiple diagnosis can be written with help of this classification. That's what I thought. This classification will help you to write a clear-cut diagnosis pertaining to that particular scenario, whether it is going to be permanent or primary dentition. Okay, so first thing is going to be the injuries to the dental hard tissues and the pulp. So what is the first thing is enamel infraction. It's actually a trauma that happens on a day-to-day basis. Okay, if you can see in any individual that there will be some sort of micro cracks in the enamel. Usually it will not be visible normally. If you trans-illuminate, you can see some sort of micro cracks running here and there. So that's called as enamel infraction. And moving on to the next fracture is going to be uncomplicated crown fracture. Okay, so when I say uncomplicated, it simply means the fracture is not involving the pulp. So when there's a fracture line that is extending up to the pulp, you're going to call it as complicated crown fractures. So in uncomplicated crown fracture, you have two things. One is enamel fracture. The other one is enamel dentine fracture. I don't have to go and explain on this because you can see the picture where the fracture involving enamel and dentine and exposing, fracture, the enamel fracture with the tooth loss of substance confined only to enamel. Whereas in enamel dentine, it is involving the enamel and dentine, but it is not involving the pulp. So this is uncomplicated crown fracture. The next one is complicated crown fracture. I was telling in the previous slide itself, when I say complicated, it simply means the fracture is involving the enamel dentine and exposing the pulp. So the other thing which will also include inside the injuries to the dental hard tissues and the pulp is uncomplicated crown root fracture as well as complicated crown root fractures. So can somebody tell me what is uncomplicated crown root fracture? It is there on the slide. You can tell me. Can somebody tell me what is there, so that I know you guys are still actively listening?
So which involves enamel, dentin, and also the cementum, sir, but not exposing the pulp, sir.
Pulp. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Srilakshmi. So it simply means when uncomplicated and complicated simply means whether there is involvement of pulp or if there is no involvement of pulp. Okay. In crown root fracture, the fracture line extending from enamel dentine and extends subgingivally to the cementum. Okay. If it is the pulp is involved, it's going to be complicated crown root fractures. Okay, so the next fracture inside the injuries to the dental hard tissues and the pulp is going to be the root fractures. Okay, so I just want to summarize injuries to the dental hard tissues and the pulp. You have enamel infraction. The next one is uncomplicated crown fracture, where there is enamel fracture and enamel dentine fracture. The next one is complicated crown fracture, where the fracture involves enamel dentin and exposing the pulp. And next is the uncomplicated crown root fracture, and you have a complicated crown root fracture. And the final thing is root fractures. So everything will be under this. Okay. If you want, you can note down the numbers as well. It is there in the website, or you can take there's a book by Anderson and Anderson, which will give you a detailed explanation about all these classification. Okay. So injuries to heart, the dental tissues, and the pulp. Hope you guys are aware of this. So moving on to the next type of classification is called the luxation injuries or injuries to the periodontal tissues. Okay. In Ellis and Davis classification, according to class 7, we saw there's displacement of the tooth without fracture of the crown. So that is the description that is given in Ellis and Davis classification. But you have certain things which we talk when we see a patient, namely like subluxation. If you would have been on the regular OP, and if you are seeing the patient on a regular basis, and you would have seen interns talking there's subluxation, and they see a patient, trauma patient, they will say if there's loosening of the tooth, they say the subluxation of the tooth. So there's nothing but mobility of the tooth. That also falls under luxation injuries. Whereas in Ellis and Davis, you're just going to term it as class 7. But you have different varieties in this, like concussion, subluxation, intrusive luxation, exclusive luxation, lateral luxation, and avulsion. So 6 things are there in injuries to the periodontal tissues. It's otherwise called as luxation injuries. Okay, when there is damage to the PDLs, it's going to term it as luxation injuries. Hope you guys are understanding what I'm saying, right? Luxation meaning when we do a tooth extraction also, we initially luxate the tooth inside the socket, or we sever the PDLs. That process is called, any damage happening to the periodontal ligaments, it's called as luxation. Okay, so that's why we are terming this as luxation injuries or injuries to the periodontal tissues. So what I meant, concussion is injury to the PDL without any abnormal loosening or displacement of the tooth. Okay, but patient will report to you saying that I had a fall yesterday or day before yesterday, that a tooth is very painful. When you touch the tooth also, even so you can't percuss this tooth because it will be, you can, but it will be, you will end up making the patient in a very painful situation, because the tooth will be very tender. Even for a simple touch, the patient will experience severe pain. So concussion is going to be severing of the PDLs here and there. Okay, so but there won't be any loosening of the tooth. Whereas subluxation is also the damage to the PDLs, which will lead to abnormal loosening, but without displacement of the tooth. There will be mobility of the tooth inside the socket, but you cannot see any other displacement. So the other displacement what we can see is the extrusive luxation, where there is partial displacement of the tooth is out of the socket, and lateral displacement is nothing but the tooth which has moved away from its axial angle or an axial direction. Okay. Next is the intrusive luxation, where the tooth is moving inside the socket. An avulsion or X-articulation is nothing but complete displacement of the tooth out of its socket. So to summarize the injuries to the periodontal tissues, we have seen concussion, subluxation, intrusion, exclusion, lateral luxation, and avulsion. 6 things are there as far as periodontal tissues are concerned. Okay, so moving on to the next classification under this is going to be the injuries to the supporting bone, where you will see 4 types. One is a combination of the mandibular or the maxillary alveolar socket. So I've given a picture adjacent to that, showing crushing and compression of the alveolar socket, where there will be fracture line inside the micro fractures can happen inside the bone, but it may not be evidently visible. Okay, sometimes when we do a normal extraction also, this sort of fracture tends to take place in the alveolar socket. Okay, comminution. Okay, comminution fracture. The next is the fracture of the mandibular or maxillary alveolar socket wall. Okay, so this sort of fracture is confined to the facial socket, facial or lingual oral socket wall. It may not extend beyond that. Okay, the next thing is going to be the entire process. Sometimes an entire anterior segment, lower anterior alveolar process will be mobile from canine to canine. Okay, so this sort of fracture is called fracture of the alveolar process. The final thing is going to be the fracture of the maxilla or mandible. Okay, there are different lines of fracture as far as this is concerned. The mandible fracture, I've given a picture showing different fracture lines in the condyle and the body of the mandible ramus, symphysis and parasymphysis region. So summarizing the injuries to the supporting bone, you have combination fracture. Next is the fracture of the mandibular alveolar socket wall. The other one is alveolar process. The final thing is fracture of the mandible and maxilla. The final thing what we see under this classification is going to be injuries to the soft tissues, nothing but the gingiva, the mucosa. You have three things under this. One is laceration, the other one is contusion, final thing is abrasion. So what is laceration? Laceration is nothing but a shallow or deep wound. Okay, usually this will reserve this injury will takes place by either injury from a sharp object. Okay, either a pen or knife or something like that can accidentally damage the soft tissue. Okay, or even there is a fall on the staircase can lead to tear in the soft tissues. Okay, so what is the next thing? Is the contusion injury. It is nothing but bruise, usually accompanied by a impact of, it usually takes place by the impact of a blunt object. In this, we don't see any discontinuity in the soft tissue, but usually it will be accompanied by submucosal hemorrhage, or there will be a huge swelling that will be seen. The last thing is going to be abrasion injury. Abrasion, the term itself will explain to us. There is nothing but a superficial wound produced by rubbing or scraping of the mucosa, leaving a raw bleeding surface. Okay. To summarize the soft tissue, you have three things: laceration, contusion, and abrasion. Okay. So I have a summary picture here. Can anybody summarize what I've been shouting for such a long time? Hope this classification. Usually this if you are thorough with this classification, you cannot go wrong in your diagnosis of traumatic injuries, because each and every area that classification that I discussed just now, the treatment plan varies to each and everything. Okay, so that is why it is important to know each and every type of trauma. So can anybody summarize according to the picture that I've shown here? I'll help you out, even if you go wrong, even if you forget. Can somebody volunteer and come forward and tell what is there? Can somebody volunteer?
So first one is the enamel infraction, sir.
Okay, good. Next.
The second one is fracture in the enamel parts.
Yeah, uncomplicated crown fracture. And enamel and dentine. The third one is, the fourth one is complicated crown fracture. Then you have, okay, I'll only summarize it off. Complicated and uncomplicated crown and root fractures. The next one is root fractures. And moving on to the luxation injuries alone, I have put in the slide. You have concussion, subluxation, extrusive luxation, lateral luxation, intrusive luxation, and avulsion. Okay, and I also discussed about injuries to the bone. You have comminution fracture, fracture of the socket wall, fracture of the alveolar process, and fracture of the maxillar mandible. The next one is injuries to the soft tissue or the gingiva. You have three things under that. One is going to be, what is that? Can somebody tell me? The last thing which I discussed now, the three things.
So laceration, contusion, and abrasion, sir.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Okay. With this knowledge, I think it will help us to erase the old classification. I won't say we should erase Ellis and Davy, but we should make some alteration and correction to move on to our diagnosis, which will eventually help us to manage the any child patient that will we come across in our practice. Okay. See, these principles of trauma management, I'm just quickly running through the slides. Hope you guys are aware of all these things, so I'm not going to go into detail of this. Sorry for the slide. The best three questions you need to ask when a trauma patient comes is when, where, and how. This three questions you should remember when you take a history. The other things you should be hope you should And you also should be aware of tetanus immunization. If there's a road traffic accident or if the child falls in the plays and falls in the mud or ground, you need to tetanize the. You should find out whether the child is actively immunized pertaining to tetanus. And for each and every trauma, there is a management. Okay, uncomplicated crown fractures. I think we'll have it more in a discussion way. I guess I have just 15-20 minutes time so that you guys answer, so that I'll move on to the next thing and give you some insights on some tips on how to handle a trauma to primary dentition pertaining to each and every classification. So uncomplicated crown fracture is nothing but fracture in the enamel or dentine, right? So how are we going to manage it?
With the restoration, sir.
Exactly, simple restoration. Okay, as any permanent dentition, you're gonna do composite restoration. Same thing can be done for a child patient as well. Okay, for primary tooth, you need to identify whether the patient is cooperative, because a 4-year or 5-year-old, sometimes they may not be cooperative in the chair side. For that, heroically, if you try doing a composite restoration, and if the patient is uncooperative, by the time you take the child out of the dental chair, or if they go out of the department, the restoration is going to fail, because we know about composite restoration, it needs to have proper isolation for it to adhere to the tooth, right? So you need to evaluate whether the child is cooperative, or whether we can do a composite restoration. If so, you can go ahead. If not, what you need to do is, the clinical tip that I can give you is, if there's a sharp margin, rounding it off, smoothen it, okay, and apply GIC, just a kind of lining, so that there's no communication between the oral environment and the underlying pulp. If there's enamel and dentin is involved, the dentinal tubules can easily permeate the microorganism into the pulp. So you need to protect it with a layer. Usually, a thin lining of GIC should serve the purpose. Okay, moving on to complicated crown fracture. So here, how are we going to manage this? If there's a pulpal involvement, okay. So basically, here also we need to take a call based upon the age of the child. Mostly, the trauma will happen to the anterior region. If the child is 6 years of age, okay, we don't have to heroically or jump and do a big pulp therapy, pulpectomy, and then try to save the tooth. If the patient is 6.5 years, might as well extract the tooth, wait for the permanent tooth erupt. Okay, so if the child is lesser than that, 5-year or 4-year, the child has to wait for another 2-3 years for the permanent tooth to erupt. In that scenario, you can do a pulp therapy and followed by a strip crown or zirconia crowns, depending upon the patient's affordability. The next thing is going to be a complicated crown fracture that I just discussed. Okay. Okay, so next is going to be a complicated crown root fracture. What do you mean by crown root fracture? We just saw in the classification. What is crown root fracture?
So which involves the enamel, dentin, and also the cementum, sir.
Cementum, okay, which means the fracture line is extending subgingivally. You need to think, if there's a fracture line extending subgingivally, if the patient is 3 or 4 year old, the best treatment is going to be extraction. Whereas for permanent teeth, that there are you have multiple treatment options like surgical extrusion or orthodontic extrusion. Okay, and then we save the tooth. Whereas for primary tooth, why we are extracting is, when there's a fracture line extending subgingivally, it will take up the infection from the oral environment and push it subgingivally. So eventually the tooth will be infected and will also infect the underlying erupting or the developing permanent successor. So we need to just extract if at all there is a complicated crown root fracture. Another thing is, sometimes there can be an uncomplicated crown root fracture where the fracture line is extending subgingivally, but it will not extend more than 3 or 4 mm. Okay, in that scenario, we just have to remove that piece alone. Uncomplicated crown root fracture, that fragment alone, you can remove it and restore it. Okay, in that scenario, we are just taking a chance. Since the patient is 3 or 4 year old, we can do this sort of management. Okay, just remove that fractured fragment, leave the other areas to heal and do a crown, or depending upon the scenario, you can go ahead with a GAC or a strip crowns. Okay. So moving on to root fracture. So what is a root fracture? Basically the fracture line in the roots. Okay. The tooth is mobile and the coronal fragment may be displaced. Sometimes it may be displaced. Sometimes it might be intact. Okay. There are two things you can take. I mean, one thing I said, that the tooth may not be displaced. In that scenario, you can wait and watch. Okay. You can wait for the physiologic resorption of that apical root fragment to take place. Okay. And if the tooth is very mobile and if it is interfering with occlusion, then we need to take some action. And also it depends upon the level of root fracture. If the root fracture is more apical, okay, then you have to go ahead for extraction and leave the if the fracture line is more coronal, then you have to extract the coronal fragment and leave the apical segment. Okay, and leave for the wait, it will resorb on its own, okay, by the physiologic process. Okay, so if at all, if the tooth is undisplaced and minor mobility is there in an apical root fracture, then you can splint for a period of 1 week time and then wait for it to get back to its normal physiologic movement. Okay, so that is how we're going to manage a root fracture in a primary dentition. So I was also discussing about alveolar fracture. If you guys remember, in the fracture to the bone, we saw about fracture of the alveolar segment. Okay, usually this will be accompanied by luxation injuries like lateral displacement or an extrusive luxation. Okay, so usually an accompanying fracture will be trauma will be there, like a lateral displacement and all. So you need to manage that. You need to reposition the tooth. Okay, and then stabilize that particular alveolar segment. Here, one more thing you need to remember in alveolar fracture is when the primary tooth is involved, when there's a lateral displacement, you need to be doubly sure that the apical root fragment is not injuring the permanent successor. Okay, this I will be showing in a slide in the luxation injuries. So I was discussing, moving on to the next thing is concussion. As far as concussion is concerned, there is no big management. The tooth will be very very painful. Even if you touch, the patient is going to suffer with severe pain. So you need to evaluate. Usually in this sort of in this type of injury, you will be seeing a ring formation around the tooth, which is nothing but the bleeding in the sulcus, which simply means there is concussion. Okay, without any mobility, and if you see a ring bleeding around the tooth, you can draw a conclusion that it's a concussion, provided you take a radiograph to confirm there is no other sort of damage which has happened. Okay, in this you just have to keep the tooth under observation for a period of 2 weeks. Usually it will resort to its normal normalcy within 1 or 2 weeks. Okay, going on to subluxation, there will be some sort of mobility within the socket. Okay, like we saw the concussion, here also there will be sulcus bleeding, may or may not be present. Here also, if the mobility is very minimal, okay, there is say for example, if there is only grade 1 mobility, okay, you just wait and advise the patients on a soft diet, wait for a period of 2 weeks, and if the mobility subsides, there's no other management, and ask the patient to maintain a good oral hygiene. And if the mobility persists beyond 2 weeks, then we have to go ahead with splinting and immobilizing the tooth. The next thing pertaining to luxation injury is a lateral luxation. What lateral luxation is nothing but displacement of the tooth away from its axial direction. It can be either mesial or distal or labial or lingual direction. Anything away from its axial direction is called lateral luxation. So we need to take X-rays to confirm all these things. Like I was telling, in the alveolar fracture or the socket wall fracture, when there is a lateral luxation, usually you will end up seeing some sort of comminution of the socket wall fracture in that particular region. So in lateral luxation, If there is no occlusal interference, we just have to leave the tooth for it to come to its normal position. If there is severe labial or lingual displacement, then we need to reposition it and we need to splint the tooth in its back to its original position for a period of around 2 to 3 weeks, okay, for it to resolve, okay. So lateral luxation. Okay, moving on to intrusion. This is another important luxation injury as far as primary tooth is concerned. Why do we need to concentrate more on intrusion injury? Why do I say there is we need to be very cautious when there is an intrusion injury of primary dentition? Can somebody tell me? I spoke in the introduction. What about the root epices of a primary tooth? If there's an intrusion injury, if there's the tooth is intruding inside the socket, going inside the socket, what will happen? Okay, nobody's answering. I'll just, we saw in the introduction. Yeah, tell me, Janani, you're about to unmute and answer.
Sir, it may affect the growing permanent incisors, sir, because primary teeth will be in an vertically it will be inclined, sir.
Exactly. That is the reason we need to be very cautious when you see a intrusive luxation. Okay. So 2 things you need to make sure. If the patient is 3-year-old or less than 3 by 2 years, usually what they say is most of the documented evidence say you wait for spontaneous re-eruption. Okay. But you need to confirm whether the intrusion has taken place epicofacially or epicopalatally. In the introduction slide, I had kept a picture. Okay, the tooth germ will be placed more palatally with respect to the apex of the primary root. Okay, so if the tooth has moved epicopalatally, you need to be very sure it's better to extract it. Okay. And if it is epicofacially, you can wait for spontaneous re-eruption, okay? Or you can extrude it and splint it off, okay? 2 things can happen. So how to confirm this? This alone, I'll just give you an insight and we'll come to an end, okay? So how do we know whether the tooth is intruded epicofacially or whether it is intruded epicopalatally? Just by taking a lateral projection. Usually we call it as a lateral ceph. But the problem with the lateral cephaloclave, lateral ceph is there will be a lot of superimposition of the adjacent structures. So in that scenario, we may not be able to clearly, distinctly say this root apex is injuring the permanent tooth germ. So another thing is we can take an occlusal radiograph. So when you take an occlusal radiograph, how do we take an occlusal radiograph for a child who's 3-year or 4-year? Just take the normal IOPA, place it in an occlusal position and angulate the, your angulation should be at around 60 degrees. Ask the patient to bite, keep the angulation at 60 degrees. Usually for an upper incisor, we take a 40 or 45 degrees. Or you keep it at 60 degrees and ask the patient to bite. Okay, so you will get all the 6 teeth in the radiograph, which will show you from canine to canine. Okay, if that particular tooth is shortened, okay, or if it is elongated, it will indicate something. Okay, so here in the slide, if it is epicofacially, when I say epicofacially, the root is more facially or labially placed. So in that scenario, that particular tooth will be shortened in the radiograph. Whereas if it is elongated, okay, you can be very sure that the tooth is injuring the permanent successor. In this scenario, you better extract it, okay, because it is going to injure the permanent successor. Of course, we need primary tooth, but if it is causing damage to the permanent tooth, which is going to be there for a long time of the individual, you have to sacrifice the primary tooth. So in that scenario, you have to extract it. Okay. Yeah, this picture is clearly giving us some insight about the epicofacial movement as well as the epicopalatal movement of the root apex in case of a primary tooth intrusion. Okay. So extrusion injury, we know it is nothing but there will be slight, the tooth will be slightly moved out of its socket. Okay. The simple management, it can be repositioned. Usually, usually this tooth will interfere with the occlusion. So it is better to reposition it and splint it. The final thing which we're going to discuss in luxation injury is nothing but X-articulation or avulsion of the tooth. That is completely the tooth is out of the socket and the parent is going to come with the tooth in the hand. So what are we going to do with that? Can somebody tell me what you're going to do? How are you going to manage this? How are you going to manage an avulsion in a primary tooth? Somebody tell me what will happen when there's an avulsed tooth. Okay, let me put it in this way. For a permanent tooth, okay, what do you do? For a permanent tooth, patient is coming within half an hour's time with the tooth in hand. Okay, what will you do?
Reimplantation, sir.
Reimplantation. What about primary tooth? Will you do that?
No, sir, we will not reimplant it, sir.
What is the reason?
So because it may be a hurdle for the next permanent tooth eruptions.
Okay. Yeah, you have come closely. Mostly, when you reimplant a primary tooth, you will land up seeing that particular tooth being what do you call ankylosed. Ankylosis is nothing but the tooth is joining to the bone, right? The symptom is joining to the bone without the supporting periodontials. So in that scenario, the physiological resorption may not take place. Like Deepika rightly pointed out, it will be a hindrance for the permanent to erupt. Okay, so try to avoid reimplanting a primary tooth. Okay, so avulsion, you just have to leave it just like that. Okay, so let me summarize today's discussion. We saw the drawbacks of what do you call Ellis and Davis classification. Can somebody tell me why did I give you this sort of new classification? I won't say new. It's an old classification by Anderson. Why did we eliminate Ellis and Davis? I just pointed out 2-3 drawbacks for Ellis and Davis. Can somebody tell me?
Sir, it implies only on the hard tissue, sir, but it does not give the classification about the soft tissues and the periodontal ligaments, sir.
Exactly. And even if it is given in periodontal ligament, it will not give us a clarity of what type of PDL problem that has happened, either it is intrusive or extrusive. The next one, very good, Sri Lakshmi. The next one, you can have multiple diagnoses. I'll give you an example. A patient is having an intrusive injury, okay, and there is a soft tissue. There's a lip laceration along with that. So what diagnosis can we write? If you have Ellis and Davy, we're just going to say there is class 7. It can be anything in class 7. Whereas the classification which I discussed just now, Anderson and Anderson classification, you can write there is lip laceration along with the intrusion of 5-1 or 1-1 with the alveolar socket wall fracture pertaining to 1-1 or 5-1. Okay, so the diagnosis is going to be comprehensive, and your management will you will be managing the lip laceration as well as the intrusion, as well as you will be handling the socket wall fracture. You have to reduce the socket wall fracture. Okay, so the management will, the diagnosis, your management will predominantly be based upon the diagnosis. So that is why for a diagnosis we need to have a proper classification. So I hope you guys will be able to at least diagnose each and every topic, like even for an intrusive luxation. Okay, we can usually take half an hour to 40 minutes lecture to completely thoroughly go ahead. In discussing about it. Since we just have 1 hour's time, I thought I'll just give you how to diagnose properly. Okay, so and I can also tell you one more thing pertaining to splinting. I was just talking about splinting for each and every other luxation injuries. Usually for a traumatic injuries, okay, the splinting period varies for each and every each and every luxation injuries. The commonest thing, you can forget everything, but the commonest thing is usually the splinting will be there for a period of around 1 week. Even for an avulsed permanent tooth, you have to splint it for a period of 1 week, and you are not supposed to give a rigid splinting. When I say rigid splinting, don't use a wire like a 19 gauge or a 21 gauge wire what we use for our normal ortho wire bending. Don't use that. We can use a you have to do a semi-rigid splinting. We can use the ligature wire. You can braid it twice. You can single braiding or 2 times braiding can be done, and just adapt it to the tooth and splint it off. The normal splinting duration is minimum from 1 week to maximum 3 weeks or 4 weeks. For extrusive luxation, usually literature say for a period of 4 weeks. That is up to 1 month you have to do it. For avulsion, it is 1 week. Okay, so it varies. So normally you can just have it up. If you're not sure about the splinting period, you can have it for a period of 2 weeks and remove the splint. And the follow-up period for each and every patient is for trauma patient, call the patient after 1 week, and call the patient after 1 month, and call the patient after 3 months and 6 months. And you're going to follow up the patient for the next 5 years, once in a year. Okay, this is the normal follow-up period. Okay, and if there is any, and pertaining to medication, see, just because of lack of time, I'm just rushing through, so that not only on diagnosis, even for management part, you'll be aware. If the tooth is intruded, okay, or any sort of intrusive luxation, or any tooth or bone fragment is soft tissue just gone inside the subgingival region, you have to start with antibiotics. If not, you don't have to give any antibiotic. Just give analgesic, relieve the pain, monitor the patient. Hope this class gives you a overview. I will not say it is a complete thing. There's so many things which you have to do as by self-reading. I've just opened up an idea about how to diagnose properly for a trauma for a primary dentition. Hope this class is useful for you. Thank you. Over to Dr. Gayatri. Gayatri, you're there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Done.
Yes, sir.
I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having, giving this lecture to your final year students.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that energetic lecture, sir.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So, 1 minute, sir. We have Dr. Lakshmi Priya here, sir.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
not exactly a formal vote of thanks, but of course a small token of gratification from all of us. I would like to thank our guest speaker, Dr. Victor Samuel sir, on behalf of our head, Dr. Jayaprakash sir, and the entire team PIDO, Tagore Dental College. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, sir, and sharing your knowledge with our students. Like how Gayatri said, I must thank you for, first of all, making our students interact with you. You literally pulled the words from their mouth, which is difficult. We are finding it very difficult to do it, especially during this online classes time.
Okay. Okay.
They will be logged in, they are there, but it's very difficult to get the response. So thank you, sir, for that, first of all. And
thank you. I would like to, I forgot to mention, I would like
Yes,
to thank Dr. Jayaprakash, my senior and my partial mentor also, so for inviting me to deliver this lecture. And I will also give a special mention to Dr. Gayatri, who was right behind me for asking resume and everything, and she was coordinating things perfectly. I would like to give a special mention to Dr. Gayatri as well.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, students, for joining. And definitely, I would like to thank our college management, principal sir, vice principals, and the heads of all the department, our faculty. And the biggest thank to God Almighty, who has kept us safe amidst this deadly pandemic. All of us are staying at home, staying safe. So definitely would like to extend a very big thanks to God Almighty. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Gayatri.
Thank you.
Thank you for coordinating. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Janani, can you hear me? Anybody can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Take break for 10 minutes and come back. Thank you.
Good morning, students. Today you'll have a class by Dr. Dakshayani here.